World War III didn't begin with noise. It began with silence. Hundreds of ships emerged on the ocean, encircling the island like a steel ring. Not a bird flew in, not a chip came out, and the world understood, right then, that the modern age was over. That morning in May 2026, the sea was deathly calm. A thick fog lay over the Taiwan Strait. The fishermen had set out around 5, as always, to cast their nets. But what they saw on the horizon wasn't a school of fish. It was piles of metal, hundreds of them. Massive navy blue blocks, standing perfectly still. The ship collection of the People's Liberation Army Navy. Plan. At first, no one believed it. Panicked voices echoed over the radio. "Are you seeing this? What the hell are these?" Someone was screaming. No answer came. As the fog slowly lifted, the scene that emerged was the dead center of a nightmare. Destroyers, frigates, submarine hunters, and behind them, the massive aircraft carrier Fujian. It wasn't moving. It was just there, silently. At 6:30, Taiwan's Ministry of Defense held an emergency press conference. The man speaking was trembling. "The People's Republic of China has declared the Taiwan Strait a military exercise zone," he said. The words barely made it out of his throat. Then he added, "The area is closed to foreign trade and flights." That last sentence ripped the world from its foundations. The Taipei Stock Exchange crashed 47 minutes after opening. TSMC shares hit rock bottom. The world's most advanced semiconductor factory, the Kaaba of processors and graphics cards, turned into a ghost town that morning in an instant. The production line stopped. Technicians in white suits stared silently at their screens. At Apple Park, at NVIDIA's Santa Clara campus, at Samsung's Seoul headquarters, panic meetings began. Phones had gone silent. Emails weren't going through. Contact with Taiwan was severed. On Wall Street, futures markets started bleeding before the opening bell. The Dow Jones dropped 6% before it even opened. The S&P 500, the tech-heavy Nasdaq, total disaster. Tesla, Microsoft, AMD, Intel, every one of them dependent on Taiwan. And Taiwan was gone. This wasn't war. Not a single bullet had been fired. But the modern world had quietly collapsed. Day one was spent waiting. The American president made an urgent statement. "The Taiwan Strait is international waters. The right to free navigation is non-negotiable." The words were harsh, but there was fear in the tone. China's response was harsher. "We are protecting our sovereign rights. Those who interfere will pay a historic price." The words hung in the air. No one knew what to do. Day 2. Power outages began in Taiwan. The island's natural gas reserves were running dry. Most thermal plants shut down. In Kaohsiung and Taipei, the lights went out in sequence. At first, hourly blackouts. But then the hours stretched. Panic videos started spreading on social media. People were running to supermarkets. Shelves emptied in 20 minutes. Water jugs, canned food, batteries, all gone. Someone came with a gun. Someone else with a knife. A security guard collapsed from blood loss. The police didn't come, couldn't come, because the police were looking for food for their families too. Day 3, the streets began to go silent. No more people rushing around. Only people waiting. Eyes looking out from behind windows. Street lamps weren't working. In the darkness of night, only candles flickered. The Chinese ships were still there. They weren't moving, just waiting. This is the Anaconda Strategy. Squeeze, suffocate, slowly. In the rest of the world, another collapse was unfolding. A world without chips. Car production stopped. In Detroit, Ford factories were suspended. Tesla shut down the lines at Giga Texas. Electronic stores ran out of stock. The iPhone 17 launch was canceled. PlayStation 6 production indefinitely postponed. The world had realized it was nothing without Taiwan's microchips. Modern civilization began to quietly crack. Day 7, different flags appeared on the horizon, stars and stripes. America was coming. The 7th Fleet had moved from the Guam and Okinawa bases. The USS Gerald R, Ford aircraft carrier, surrounded by 12 destroyers, was advancing toward the Taiwan Strait. The mission order was clear: break the blockade, restore free navigation. But the real mission was different: make China back down. On the evening of the 7th day, 2 giant armadas came face to face at sea, only 30 kilometers between them. On radar screens, dots were closing in. On the deck of the USS Gerald R, Ford, F.A., 18 Super Hornets had moved into combat position. Pilots were seated in their cockpits. Engine noise shook the entire ship, but no takeoff order came, only waiting. On the Chinese side, J-15 fighters lined the deck of the Fujian aircraft carrier. On missile ramps, DF-21D carrier killers waited ready to fire. Radios were silent. No one was talking, only static and breathing. At 21:47, first contact was made. American Admiral Mark Henderson called out on an open frequency to his Chinese counterpart Xu Qiliang. "These waters are subject to international transit rights. Our ships will pass." The response came 10 seconds late. Xu's voice was calm, but it was the voice of a man with tight muscles. "This is an exercise zone. Interference is cause for war." Henderson didn't respond. He did, but the words were, "The order to advance has been given." The morning of day 8, the USS Gerald R. Ford had closed to within 15 kilometers of the blockade line. Chinese destroyers began changing position. The formation that emerged carried a clear message: one more step, and it's over. But the Ford didn't stop, because stopping meant the end of American hegemony. If it turned back here, Taiwan falls. Taiwan falls. Japan and South Korea lose confidence. They lose confidence. The Pacific is lost. The Pacific is lost. The world order collapses. So the Ford advanced. At 9:13, warning fire came from a Chinese frigate. 30mm guns, range shells, 800 meters ahead of the Ford. Giant columns of water rose from the sea. American soldiers on the ship hit the deck. But the Ford didn't stop. Henderson gave the order: don't change course. Continue advancing. Meanwhile, in Taiwan, the power had gone out completely. Taipei was dark. Streets were silent. In homes, people sat by candlelight. Radios weren't working. Televisions were off. No social media. No one knew what was happening. Only distant explosion sounds could be heard. But no one could see what was exploding. On day 11, something happened. A small thing, but the kind that changes history. An American MQ-9 Reaper drone flew low to photograph the Chinese ships. The Chinese radar operator panicked. Enemy attack, reconnaissance, or missile. Decision time, 4 seconds. He decided. Pressed the button. An HQ-9 air defense missile launched, left a white trail in the sky, and vaporized the MQ-9. Henderson saw the screen. Drone signal lost. His aide shouted, "We're hit." Henderson stood up. His face was red. "I'm requesting authorization for return fire," he said. 11 minutes passed before Washington answered. For 11 minutes, no one spoke. On the ship, only the drone of machinery. Then the radio crackled. "You are not authorized. Negotiations are ongoing." But it was too late to negotiate. Because on day 12, on another ship, another man pressed another button. An SM-2 missile launched from the USS Changhoon destroyer. Target: Chinese frigate Yuncheng. The missile raced across the water. The Chinese crew saw it at the last second. Close-in defense systems engaged. But too late. The missile hit the ship's midsection. The blast was so terrible the ship split in two. The 274 soldiers inside spilled into the sea. Most died instantly. The rest burned. The rest drowned. Xu Qiliang saw the fireball on screen. His face froze like stone. Then he gave the order. Full retaliation. All batteries fire. The sky turned red. Hundreds of missiles shot into the air. YJ-18 anti-ship missiles, CJ-10 cruise missiles, DF-21D ballistic missiles, all at once. Radar screens filled with dots. Aegis defense systems on American destroyers began to alarm. But everyone knew they wouldn't make it, because stopping 140 missiles at once was impossible. USS Muston destroyer was hit first. A missile struck the bridge. The command center vaporized in an instant. Another entered at the waterline. The ship started taking on water. Sank in 20 minutes. USS Chung Hoon saw plenty of revenge for the missile it fired. 3 missiles hit at once. The ship was a fireball. Of the 300 soldiers inside, 180 died that night. The rest were wounded. The rest lost at sea. Not a single missile hit the USS Gerald R Ford, because 10 kilometers away, the USS Russell destroyer had drawn all the missiles to itself. Not intentionally. Radar confusion, but the result was the same. Russell took 11 missiles. The deck was leveled. Fire broke out in the aircraft hangar. Ammunition exploded. The ship spun out of control and slowly began to sink. Henderson stood on the bridge. Everything around him was burning. On the radio, screams, calls for help, sounds of death. But he just stared at the screen. The Chinese ships were still there, still firing. That's when he understood. This wasn't a warning. This was war. The morning of day 13, the world woke to a new reality. Chinese state television announced that American invaders had been taught a historic lesson in the Taiwan Strait. On screen were images of burning American ships. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera all broadcast the same footage. The world was in shock. At the White House, the National Security Council convened in emergency session. The room was silent. The president spoke. "What are the options?" The Secretary of Defense replied, "3 options. Withdraw, wait, or the nuclear option." The president flinched. "Nuclear?" The secretary nodded. "We're losing the conventional war. China has superiority. Taiwan will fall. If it falls, hegemony ends." The president looked out the window. Outside, Washington seemed calm. People didn't know. Not yet. But in a few hours, they would learn. News headlines began scrolling across screens. War has begun. The world in World War III. Nuclear war risk. In Taiwan, no one was watching screens anymore, because there were no screens, no electricity, no internet, only darkness and missile trails in the sky. Chinese warships had begun docking at Keelung Port in the north of the island. Air defense had collapsed. The army had scattered. The government missing. The president was in a secret bunker, but there was no army to protect him. The streets were silent. People had locked themselves in their homes. Some committed suicide. Some fled. But there was nowhere to flee, because the sea was closed. The sky was closed. The island was a prison, and the guards were coming. On day 15, Taiwan President Lai Ching-te released a video recording. The recording was shot with a shaky handheld camera. A generator hummed in the background. His face was pale, his eyes sunken. "People of Taiwan, the resistance is over," he said. His voice broke. "I am dissolving the government. I am surrendering the island to Chinese administration." Then the Chinese flag appeared on screen. The video cut out. The world froze watching that video, because this wasn't just the fall of an island. This was the death of the world order established after World War II. America had lost, for the first time, truly. At the Pentagon, panic meetings continued. One of the generals slammed the map. Taiwan's fallen. What's next? Japan? South Korea? The Philippines? The president didn't answer. Couldn't, because the answer was terrifying. All of them. In Tokyo, the sirens wailed at 22:34. Chinese bombers had attacked American bases in Okinawa. Kadena Air Base had turned into a sea of fire. F-35 seconds were burning on the ground. The runway was riddled with holes. Hundreds of soldiers died. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida held an emergency press conference, but the words knotted in his throat. "The American umbrella," he said, but couldn't finish the sentence, because the umbrella had collapsed. In South Korea, Seoul's streets descended into chaos. People were expecting an attack from the north. North Korean radio played victory music. Kim Jong-un gave a speech. American imperialism has fallen to its knees. The time for reunification has come. The South Korean army mobilized, but morale was non-existent. Soldiers were dropping their weapons and running home, because America had lost. If America lost, who could possibly win? On day 17, in Europe, NATO decided to convene an emergency session, but the meeting was a disaster. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz spoke. "This is not our war. Europe cannot enter a Pacific conflict." French President Emmanuel Macron was harsher. "America dragged us into Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. Enough." The British Prime Minister was alone. "We're allies," he shouted, but no one in the hall was listening. NATO effectively died that day. In America, the streets erupted. In New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, thousands poured into the squares. But this wasn't protest. This was panic. Supermarkets were looted. Gun stores emptied. Fights broke out at gas stations. Someone fired a shotgun. 5 people dead. Police came but couldn't control it. Because the police were at the supermarkets too, gathering food for their families. Wall Street experienced total collapse. The Dow Jones dropped 43%. S&P 500, 51%. Nasdaq nearly zeroed out. Because TSMC was gone. Chips were gone. Technology was gone. Apple stock lost 78% in one day. Nvidia went bankrupt. Tesla closed its factories. Amazon stopped deliveries. Because there were no drones, no chips, no logistics. The modern world had stopped. Day 20, Russia made its move. Vladimir Putin gave a speech. "The American order is over. A new world is being born." The next day, Russian tanks crossed the Ukrainian border, but this time, no one resisted. Because there was no America, no NATO. Europe was divided. The Ukrainian army laid down its weapons. Kyiv fell in 3 days. Zelensky died. How he died isn't clear. But he died. The Baltic states panicked. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, all of them saw the Russian tanks coming. NATO didn't help, because there was no NATO anymore. Poland closed its borders. Germany started building walls to prevent the refugee influx. France protected its own borders. The European Union shattered overnight. In the Middle East, Iran made its move. Hundreds of missiles rained down on Israel. Tel Aviv plunged into darkness. Israel retaliated, but it wasn't enough, because Iran had China behind it, Russia behind it. America was absent. Israel was alone. It considered the nuclear option, but if it used it, it would be completely isolated. It didn't. And Iranian tanks entered Jerusalem within 3 weeks. Day 25, power outages began in America. Because the power grid was chip-dependent. No spare parts, no technicians. Everyone was fleeing. Cities plunged into darkness. New York was dark. Los Angeles was dark. Chicago, Houston, Phoenix, all of them. People were lighting fires in the streets. Gangs had formed. Laws weren't working. Police melted away. The army was busy protecting its own bases. The final meeting was held at the White House. The president sat at the table. His hair had gone completely white. He'd aged 20 years in 25 days. "Nuclear option," he said. No one spoke. The room was silent. Then the chairman of the Joint Chiefs spoke. "You can't win a nuclear war, sir. China has 350 nuclear warheads. Russia has 6,000. If we launch, they launch. The world dies." The president put his head on the table. He cried. For the first time, in front of everyone, Day 30, the People's Republic of China declared a new world order. President Xi Jinping gave a speech in Taipei, the capital of Taiwan. Behind him was a giant Chinese flag. "American hegemony is over," he said. "The new world will be built under Chinese leadership." The delegates in the hall stood and applauded. Russia, Iran, North Korea, Pakistan, Venezuela, all of them were there. They were the founders of the new order. America stepped aside, withdrew its military, evacuated its Pacific bases, abandoned Japan, abandoned South Korea, abandoned the Philippines. All of them, because it had lost. And losers don't speak. They just withdraw silently. Europe had shattered. Germany made a deal with Russia. France tried to build its own empire. Britain withdrew to its island. Eastern Europe came under Russian influence. The Middle East came under Iranian control. Africa became a Chinese colony. The world had been divided again. But this time, the winner was clear. Day 45, civil war began in America. Texas, Louisiana, and Oklahoma declared independence. California formed the Pacific Union. New York was left on its own. In Washington, there was no one. The president had moved to a military base, but no one was listening to him. America wasn't America anymore, just a landmass broken into pieces. The world adapted to the new reality. There were no chips, but life went on. Without technology, with old phones, with flashlights, with lanterns, people returned to farms. Cities emptied. The remnants of civilization slowly rotted. And the new generation, listening to stories of the old world, couldn't believe it. "Did every house really have electricity?" a child asked. His grandfather nodded. "Yes," he said, "but it's gone." Looking back at history, when World War III began is debatable, but when it ended is clear. It never did, because the hot war ended in 15 days, but the cold reality lasted forever. The silence that began in the Taiwan Strait swallowed the world, and the modern age died, not with a roar, but with a whisper. The Anaconda had squeezed, and no one could breathe.